I had to, for so many years, look at a body that I knew did not belong to me. And of course, I can talk about this now because, yes, I looked at myself, I looked at my body, I looked at parts of my body that I couldn't actually look at. But it was there in my
Mm.
reflection. But today, I, I get out the shower twice a day and I can stay naked for as long as I possibly can.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mom Used to Say No, the podcast where we are going to talk about the taboo subjects our parents told us not to talk about in public. My name is Luis David Rodriguez, and this week's episode is about transsexuality. I'm interviewing Priyanka, one of my favorite people. She has an amazing vibe and it's super wise. She will be talking about her life journey and her opinions about what it means to be transsexual in the 21st century. I want to remind you also to follow the podcast and subscribe. You will be helping me a lot to grow it and to reach more people. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel to watch all the videos. Without further ado, I invite you to listen to this amazing interview. So, Priyanka, it's a pleasure and such a privilege for me to have you here in Mom Used to Say No. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I want people to know that you were one of my inspirations for even for the podcast. When I met you last year, I fell in love with your voice, and I told you there, and I said like I have to do something with this woman. I don't know what. When I was thinking about what kind of project should I start, and now the podcast is ideal because actually just like listen to your voice will be like the number one thing.
Oh my gosh, Louis, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It is a great, great pleasure to be here, an opportunity. And wow, that is deep. To be inspired, to have to gain inspiration from just listening to my voice on our first meeting. I think that's quite an amazing, profound statement to make. So I hope I'm able to live up to that and my voice pleases your audiences as well. And it's just a great listening pleasure to everybody who tunes into this. And thank you for having me and sharing this moment with me.
Of course. There's something special that I want to share as well, and I want you to know is that we literally met for 10 minutes, and I just felt such a nice connection with you. And this is very seldom that happens with strangers that you start talking. And I remember I was saying, um, I was talking about how I was that year, and I said something about that I was dealing with my own demons, and you reacted to that, and you said like, "Huh." Then you might be interested in this kind of content if you are already in that stage in your life that you can refer to this kind of phrases. And I think I connected to that, and it's like it gave me a hint, and we will find out in this episode along the conversation that you have had an interesting life.
Yes, it has been extremely interesting, and you're such a great listener to have remembered all of that. I think it's extremely interesting for me to get this kind of feedback because when you're working, I mean, it's different for me in a certain way because I am doing my current job in a foreign language. I am schooled in English. My home language is English, and now living in Berlin, which is amazing, and I love it. There are certain reservations when I meet people, but it gets that much easier when I have a foreign client such as yourself because we already have that familiarity about not being in our native country, speaking our native languages. So when I get a chance to speak English to a client, which I did with you, there's that immediate connection. So that was amazing, and starting a conversation which you clearly remember so vividly is it touches me to know that I am starting a conversation with somebody that I'm meeting for a first time, and it has such an impact on them that something like a podcast is derived from, which is very interesting. And to go back to your most important question, which I think tonight is based on, which is my life. Yes, it has been extremely interesting. I have lived and continue to do so, living a very colorful life, I think. And I think as humans, we continue to learn every single day. And I may have mentioned this to you before, that pinnacle in our lives, we think we reach it, but we continue to reach it every single day. And that is me. That's how I live every day. And yes, the one thing that makes me completely different to most people is that I was not born in the body that I exist with today. I was born and assigned male at birth and grew with this for many, many years of my life, and I could not attach a description to the way I was feeling because I was born in the 70s, believe it or not. I am quite late in my life, in my years. And I knew something was different. I physically transitioned in 2014, but I have been transitioning for the past 2 decades and a bit. For more than 25 years, I've been transitioning, but physically transitioned. Uh, and I mentioned this because I think when it comes to trans people, a lot of people are more interested in the physical transition, but it's not always about that. But I am one of those who have physically transitioned and to alter my body to suit my soul, to suit my mind, to suit the way I feel and think. So that is something I've done. And yes, that is part and parcel of the life that I've been living. And I think we are going to detail some of that in some of your questions.
My first question, and I will have then a continuation on it later on, is um, what are your preferred pronouns?
It has always been, even pre-transition, it was, I mean, I was presenting to the world because that's my domestication. A little background firstly. I come from a single parent background. I have two siblings. I basically grew up with my brother, my mom, and myself. We were a threesome. And obviously, I was assigned male at birth, so I was domesticated. So my life up until my 20s, I was presenting as male. When I discovered that I was on my path to finding my correct and proper identity, and I met the people that also assisted me on this journey, I met people I identified with, whom I related to, the transition where my pronoun um, is concerned started. And from, I'd say, mid 20s, I took the pronoun of she and her, which is how I'm permanently dressed. There's no two ways about it. I mean, you meeting me for the first time would not think to address me other than she or her, and that is
Mhm.
my preferred pronoun.
I want to also have another episode regarding those subjects, and I have to investigate. It's not an easy subject.
I am a woman today, you know. However, sometimes the confusion comes in when my status is made known to a person who doesn't really know me. And then sometimes I find it a little confusing for them to think about the pronoun to address me as, which there is nothing to think about. I am presenting as female. I am female. I'm living as female. Although you know that I have a past which was assigned male at birth, there's no confusion. And I think sometimes that's where there's a little bit of an insensitivity, if I may call it that.
Um, and I think it's also connected to the fact that it's just the empathy in humanity. Some people have it, some others don't. and just like the basic borders of respect to other people. And sometimes this is not ill intended. It comes a lot from ignorance, and this is why I want us to have this open conversation so people can understand the impact of those assumptions.
Absolutely. There is not enough education around this topic. This topic is like a felt fire right now.
Mm.
Transness is out there. You see it on the television. You're reading about it more. I'm busy working on my book at the moment to tell the story. And it's not just about telling my story. It's about helping people identify with this topic, helping people who has had challenges in their lives, who go through this, and not just transness. We all experience challenges, Louis. On a myriad of platforms, with not just gender, but things that we feel is not normal in society. So this book is being written in a way that anyone who has had a challenging time in their life can identify with this, and it resonates with them, and it helps them to see that you can get through anything. You could just listening to somebody else's life or story can help you identify, and vulnerability is very important in a situation as such. What we're doing now is being vulnerable. Whoever's going to watch this is going to like, oh my gosh, and have a moment, and to come back to calling it ignorance, yes, to a certain degree, and people tend to fear the unknown, and
Correct.
that's something we have to change. And doing a podcast like this is helping in a situation as such.
Thank you, because it's exactly the message I want to bring. Um, it's shining a light in something. I can understand people being afraid of the dark. Like we were all kids, and we know that the unknown is scary. But once you shine a light on it, it's like, oh, okay, now I can understand it. And this subject, like you said, it has been always so complicated, and now and then, and nowadays it has been politicized as well, and it which is not fair, because there have been trans people as long as there have been humans on earth. And now I'm glad that at least we are living in a time where we can talk about these things, that there are more rights, that people feel more secure to be out there and express themselves and feel that they can live their truth. But we still have a lot of work to do.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, going back to what you said, the Hijras in India have been around since 17th century. The Mahus in Hawaii, they've also been around for many, many years. And these are huge civilizations that has been in existence for forever. And it's just not been exposed. There has not been any exposure. So it's not like transness is something new. It's just coming to the
Correct.
surface now, and it's blowing up. But it's always been there. It's not a phase. It's not something somebody is just. It's not fashion, if I may say
Right.
that.
Right.
It's not a fashionable
Yes.
thing. It's something that has really been in existence, and it is real, and it affects all of us. So I I'm not sure if you know what the word stealth means, but
No.
basically living in stealth is just trying to, for a person like myself, it's trying to just blend into society. And
Hmm.
When I when I decided to transition, I thought maybe part of me would want to live that way, to live in stealth and just blend in as just another cis female in the world. And I started to look at things that were through the media. I started to look at what was going on in America, or so many trans people being killed. I started to read about trans people not being employed because of who they are and what they represented. And I am one of the lucky people because my transness happened gradually, but I always knew that I was different. So when it came to work, I was always employed. I didn't have to go through the channels of sex work or doing things that is seen upon as not part of society, which these things are. People do whatever they need to do to survive. And looking at all of these things, I knew in my heart of hearts that I couldn't just be still about it. I am a story, a privileged story that when shared could help people, everyday people, not just trans people, but everyday people who tend not to look at us trans people as a part of society. And to tell the story in my way was going to not just help people, but also help me to be visual and see that we have a place on this earth, we have a place in society, and we belong. So it became important to me to be able to tell my story. Hence, I went down the channel of writing the book, and I'm doing work like this. I have had two readings already publicly, telling my story to an audience who were interested to listen to me, and starting to beat the drum, starting to be visual and vocal to help a subculture within a subculture within a subculture that needs to be heard and seen and respected.
It's amazing, and one can feel it with the passion as well. You talk about it, but not only that, you talk with kindness. And this is so important when we need to share these kind of messages and we are fighting this fight is there are some people that find rewarding to be completely against the culture and be just loud, and they think that this is how they want to send the message, which is okay. We're all humans and we are going to be different and reacting different to things, but it's so much deeper when you just slow it down and then you are having a conversation, and I think this is twice as powerful.
I don't disagree with you. And like I said when we started, I'm really privileged to have this conversation with you. Life as a person with difference is never easy. And when you say I speak with kindness, of course, I was angry for a long time in my life. I was angry that people didn't look at me the way I wanted to be seen. I looked for validation for many, many years in my life, always wanted to be validated, always wanted to be seen for the woman that I represented, the woman that I am today. And the kindness that I speak with, the love that I speak with comes from a lot of pain. And that's what eventually happens. You've got to turn it into kindness and love. Love is an emotion that honestly does make the world go around. And anything that is based on love is the only truth can be derived from it. Truth, honesty, kindness, every positive emotion you can possibly think of. If it's based on love,
I just wanted to say that I respect that so much because there's so much truth in what you're saying. And I can understand that. Sure, now you can talk or speak with kindness, but there it comes from a lot of pain.
I'm lucky to be able to speak about my struggle. You know, I'm lucky to be able to speak about a painful past. And not a lot of people get to do that. And this is why we get stuck. We are stuck in a vacuum because we never got a chance to unpack these things. Unpacking it is so important, whether it's with friends, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's in therapy. You know, therapy, I mean, is frowned upon by some people, and it shouldn't because it helps us unpack so much of stuff. For me, my biggest issue first, before anything, was my abandonment. My father leaving my mother, leaving my brother and I before I was even born. So that was always there. It took me so long to treat relationships better because I always felt that any man I fell in love with was going to leave me. And it took me a long time. I live with such security now, being married to a wonderful man and having love. And, when these experiences, which is known as negative experiences, as dark experiences, when it molds you and it shapes you and defines you for who you are today, that in itself is a learning experience second to none, if you can take from that, because these are tools. And you can only do that when you start living your truth. And living truthfully is extremely important for you to actually escalate to whom you should actually be, to whom you want to represent. And living truthfully, all of this comes from that. And living truthfully is accepting what has happened to you, accepting your past, embracing it, um, not allowing it to hold you back.
I can empathize completely. I understand, and I've lived as well the feeling of not feeling suitable, of disappointing my family, and this really shapes so much how you perceive the world. And when you are lucky enough to self-reflect and realize how much toxic behaviors and things you are replicating because of that pain that was caused for being different and growing up in a society that was simply always sending you the message that you are wrong, and this really can um, affect how well of an adult you become.
Mhm.
And I think you and I now can completely agree that we are lucky. We are the lucky ones that we were able, and I always feel like this. I was able to not fall into this dark hole that many people fall, and it's not their fault because probably they don't have like friends, a secure system to take care of them. And when you're not strong enough yourself and you don't have the tools to rescue yourself, then this can create really, really dark shadows inside some people.
Yes, of course. For me, I was lucky enough to have people to guide me. It was hard growing up because I come from an Indian community.
You
Come
grew up
from
in South
in
Africa or
South
in India?
in South Africa. I was born, raised,
Okay.
educated in South Africa, but ethnically I am culturally Indian. Both my parents are Indian. And coming from an apartheid regime, there was something called the Group Areas Act at the time. So Indians would live in a community, colored people would live in a community, black people in a community, white in a different community. And, there was always, systemic racism that was always alive and well. And you had those challenges going on. Although I think I was so young at the time that I was not very politically inclined. So I was traveling in my own bubble of confusion. I was traveling in this bubble of confusion, which represented who am I, what am I, where do I belong, from a tender age of 7. So there wasn't at the time anybody that could guide me, not an elder, not a parent. I was not exposed to gay people as well. It was the 80s when you sort of saw hints of it on the television. There was no internet that you could read about these things, and I know you should know too that that was also a very challenging time for homosexuality. You know, in the 80s, there was the HIV and AIDS epidemic. So gay people were frowned upon. Gay people were looked at as a non-entity in society, people that didn't belong, people that were spreading a virus. There were all these things going on. And then there was something called transgenderism, which I had no idea of. And I have to tell you that in this time of knowing that there was something in society that was being categorized as gay, homosexuality, whatever term you'd like to use to describe it, I still didn't feel a sense of belonging. So there was this constant confusion. Moving to Johannesburg from Durban is where my actual adult life began. And then I started to find my support system. I found a guide in my best friend who is no longer with us. And Romeo was the one person who saw me for the very first time. And I write about this in my book. It's so explicit because in my book, I'm writing letters to Romeo. And one of my letters to him is talking about my journey today, which he's missed on because he left us before I physically transitioned. But he saw me for the first time when I was finishing my apprenticeship. I started my last year in college for hairdressing. And we shared the same college class. And when I walked into my class and I was late, I was the last student arriving and I entered and he saw right through my androgynous presentation because at that time I was presenting as androgynous, borderline androgynous, should I say, because I still had a different uh, fashion sense. And Johannesburg compared to Durban was more high fashion. And I was still finding my way. So I was fairly new in Johannesburg. And he saw right through that. And meeting Romeo in my life was my first guidance, was my first human experience with somebody who knew where I belonged, who saw me before I even saw myself. And he literally took me under his wings. And from this, my middle name is Santana, the name that defined me. From this, I went through four name changes in my life. And from Mark, I transitioned to Santana. And in my book, I write about this, that all the names that I went through in my life represented something that I stood for along my journey, finding my truth, finding the true belonging within myself, the self that I needed to present to the world. And Santana was a very defining moment in my life before Priyanka. Priyanka is the woman that's sitting here in front of you today, the woman that I represent. That
I just love that name, by the way.
thank you. Direct translation is amiable, and it's also defined as a kind of person, the name that belongs to a person that could walk into a room and just shed light and allow people to feel comfortable. Basically, that is what it translates to. And I didn't really know this when I chose this name. Um, so yeah, finding myself much later in my life. I mean, I don't live with regret, Louis. For me, I am the kind of person that believes everything happens as and when it should. And I've learned through the years to always trust the process, and this is what I do. I live that to this day. I trust the process. And I think one has to eventually, because, universally, I believe in the universe. I believe in spirituality, which is what I practice. I'm a Hindu. I was raised a Hindu. I continue to do that. It helps me in my daily life. My morning prayer and meditation is something that keeps me grounded. It helps me. The purity that I hope I shed through being me comes from that.
That was one of my questions. Actually, is do you belong to a particular religion? And if so, how did it impact how you feel about yourself?
Positively, in one word. I, I was always raised as a Hindu. My mum is still a practicing Hindu. I went wayward in my 20s. I lost all culture, all religion. I was too busy finding myself, and through that, what replaced it was alcohol and drugs and smoking cigarettes and doing all sorts of things that we are taught not to put into our bodies,
Experimenting.
minds, and spirits. And so I was living a rock star lifestyle. completely and utterly. I partied. The 2 days that I didn't party was probably a Tuesday, a Monday and a Tuesday. But the rest of the week, I was a party animal, going out and meeting friends. And so there was no time for spirituality. There was no time to what I call a Lakshmi. Lakshmi in my culture and tradition is light. And I am taught to bring light into my life and those that I care about daily. So I start my day with my Lakshmi, which is lighting my Mahalakshmi. And I was not practicing all of this for many, many years. And I think it was around the time of my father's death, which was in my mid 30s. Something happened within me. I felt like not a huge loss, but I found a closure in my life. Hearing about his death, I was in no position, frame of mind, or knowing to attend his funeral, but I did mourn his death. I have to say, it did affect me, and that was something very profound that happened in my life and helped me to find my way back to where I belonged. And quite honestly, that was partly joined to when I decided that, oh, I'm finding my light again. I was invited by a client, actually. This is a true story. I was still living in Johannesburg, and I had this client. There is a belief that we have in Hinduism, and it's called the Sai Baba movement. And Sai Baba was the easiest way for me to describe it is what the Pope is to the Catholics, but not really, because he was a mortal
Okay.
being. He's no longer, he's left the earth. And Sai Baba was an organization, a movement that is still going. It's globally known. It's universally known. And I was invited by a client to celebrate his birthday. So basically, you would go to a gathering, and it's like going to church, only it's on a Thursday, but it's Hinduism. And you would go and you would chant and you would meditate and you would sing in vernacular. And I went to this, and I found it very, very intriguing, very interesting. It was something I was raised with, but like I say, I went wayward in my 20s, and I completely let go of all of these experiences. And this was one of the defining moments that brought me back to my culture and my spiritual beliefs. And from that moment on, I started going to satsang, which is what it's called, this gathering. I started going to satsang religiously every Thursday. And then I started to light my Lakshmi every day. And that is how it's probably about 20 years now that I found my way back. I'm now 51. Oh my God, there, I said it.
Oh, you look amazing.
Thank you. So I found my way back like 3 decades ago. And to go back to your question, yes, it does center me. It does ground me. And even when we travel, I may not take my Lakshmi with me, but every morning when I wake up, I do my morning chants and I do my meditation wherever I am in the world.
Beautiful. I want to know what it's like for you to be a woman. What is the meaning to be a woman?
Firstly, I'm very pro women. I love my womanhood. I have to. I love, love. I'm in awe of celebrating my womanhood daily. I have such respect for all us women. And I think it's not difficult for me to do because I had just a mom my entire life. My mom, who has inspired so much in my life, being a single parent. She is a fighter to this day. She is 81 years old and she looks 60. She has a young heart. She has a young mind set. And she has a health, which we are so blessed with. And her spirit is just beautiful, her fighting spirit. And she has also had a really, really, really challenging time in her life. So my womanhood is derived from that because she is the first woman that I identified with. So a lot of who I am comes from her. And then, of course, there's other influences, profound women in our lives, authors, Ayanna Van Sant, Maya Angelou, these women that you read about that tells their stories, that inspires. And yes, of course, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I find Naomi Campbell inspiring to me in a way, because I also in my younger days I aspired to be a model as well, so and it came from there.
Okay.
Um, so yes, there is that, but I celebrate my womanhood every single day. It's very different, and I can say this because I had to, for so many years, look at a body that I knew did not belong to me. And of course, I can talk about this now because yes, I looked at myself, I looked at my body, I looked at parts of my body that I couldn't actually look at, but it was there in my
Mm.
reflection. But today, I, I get out the shower twice a day and I can stay naked for as long as I possibly can because I celebrate my womanhood. And yes, it is attached to your physical appearance. It's so because we are brought up in a binary system, where we are taught
Mm.
there's male and female. And for me to know that I have the body that I've always wanted, I remember many, many years ago, I was interviewed by a magazine in South Africa called True Love. And and I remember saying my one statement was, I wish to one day go to bed in the body that I have and wake up the next day in the body that I want. And literally it did happen, although I had to travel to Bangkok to make that dream come true, which it happened, I can't believe it. Oh my God. I didn't think you see, talking about these things is manifestation. You don't realize it. When you're
Yes.
talking about this, I'm talking about my book now. It's manifesting, just picking on it and mentioning it. This is manifestation, and I believe in that.
We still have a little bit of time, but just in case we run out of it, I would like to read something that I think it's important as well, in something that I want to share, and then listen to what you have to say
For
about
sure.
it. I was researching. I found a nice article by the HRD, which I think it's the like Human Resources
Hmm.
Directory, and they have an article talking about what kind of questions you're not supposed to ask a trans person. And I thought this is very interesting because, as well, my idea for this episode was on how can we ask questions if we are curious, and what questions are not really kind to ask. And they have a few. They say things like, "Don't ask what toilets do you use." Don't ask, "Have you had a sex change operation?" Or "Are you gay?" Or "What is your real name?" "Do you take hormones?" "What do your family think?" And why are there so many transgender people now? Some questions can be triggering. Do you feel like this with these kind of questions? I must admit that a few of them crossed my mind, and then reading this, and I thought like, yeah, sure, this is not polite to ask. I wouldn't like someone to come and ask me if I had a testicle operation when I was younger, which I did. I can share this now, but it's not something that you want to go and share with the world. So it's exactly the same. Why do we think that we are entitled to ask these questions? So my question to you is like, what's the limit?
If you would notice that I sort of answer these questions before being asked it.
Yes.
And that is my way from watching a lot of trans women being interviewed, trans people like Laverne Cox, Angelica Ross, Janet Mock, Candace Kane. I have watched these trans women being interviewed. There is one especially, I'm trying to think of her name, that was caught in a mix because the interviewer kept going to the surgery aspect of it, kept trying to go there. So I from watching that, I volunteer this information. So before, if the interviewer is
Okay.
thinking of it, I've somehow answered it by mentioning it. And if you've seen, it's not in a impolite way. It's not in a rude, profane manner. I'm talking about it like we are just discussing somebody having a breast augmentation surgery who is cis female. Because these conversations I had too, women would say, "Oh, I had my
Yeah.
my breast augmentation done," which I've had done too. But because I was not in the body that I belong to today, it is it is something that is seen as a sensational topic. But there's nothing sensational about it.
Mm.
That's why I choose to, in a way, talk about it and bring it out there. So it's not because I don't think people, again, and thank you to you for researching that and reading about it, because a lot of the times some interviewers do that, but yet they still have this way of probing, and that can trigger
Mm.
some trans people. And this subject is we are focusing on transness, and it can be. I am grateful for making peace with a lot of things in my life. I am grateful for being able to speak mindfully and react mindfully to some questions that I may find insensitive, because I have a mindset that I have trained myself with not to allow myself to go there. But not everybody is that way. So, yes, some of the questions that you've touched on can be insensitive to some trans people. I'm one of those that try not to let it trigger me, you know. A question to ask someone like me which toilet I use, I think that's a stupid question. It's just what sort of question is that? I've just told you I'm just speaking out in general, I'm not particularly to you. I just told you that I'm a woman. What toilet I think it would be bombastic if I had to walk into a man's toilet, but I tend to get away with that too because they find it quite sexy. A beautiful woman coming into a male toilet, they're like, "Oh, please do stay." So that, in a way, as well, is not an offensive thing. I think we put too much of emphasis on that toilet. Okay, at home, is there a male and female toilet? If you think about it.
Mm.
And I think that is controlled because for safety measures, not because of who you represent. If we think about it logically,
Yeah.
out in public, there's a male and female toilet purely for protection. So women do not get themselves it's not because of gender. If you think about it logically, that's what I think. It's for one's safety
Yeah.
more than one's gender. I mean, there are times when I've gone out to a nightclub or a bar and I really needed to use the loo. And the women's toilet was, the women's toilet's always busy because we're always doing things, powdering our nose.
Which is
And if a
always busy.
man's
Yes.
toilet is free, I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it
Yeah.
because it's a toilet just like any other, right? It's not going to define me or make me less or more of who
Sure.
I am because I live my truth. I know who I am. That toilet usage is not going to define me.
Yeah, you touch an important point on security, and I think then the argument for those who don't accept trans people and they say, for example, if you're a trans woman, no, but he's biologically a man, and then he's not allowed to enter the women's bathroom. And then I think to myself, like, what are they expecting? Like, this person feels and behaves and is a woman. Do you think she's going to enter the women's bathroom to do anything to attack someone? Like,
I
it's
mean,
just ridiculous.
also like, gay men use the women's toilet too sometimes, because they are perceived
Mm,
as a
yes.
non-threat, so. So
Yes.
what's different? What changes things? It happens all the time. I could take a gay friend with
Exactly.
me into the bathroom. I mean, we did it at nightclubs when we were sharing lines of cocaine or whatever. I mean, it's not a life I live anymore, but
Yeah.
it was just easier. It was just easier for my gay friends to come with me into the women's toilet.
What is the best way for people to support a trans person?
I think empathy and
What do you
love,
think?
firstly. Uh, and I know, I've got friends, cisgendered friends, a lot, mostly female, males too. And it's just so beautiful that because my story is my story to tell. I don't just leave home thinking, oh, let's see who I'm going to meet today and I'm going to divulge my transness to. That's not how life works. Do you know what I mean? However,
Hmm.
when I feel close to somebody, it organically happens that I feel compelled to share my story with them. And what's so beautiful about the people that I attract in my life that they are so emotionally evolved that they don't find it fascinating, they don't find it sensational that when they're at the next party and I'm absent, to make this their conversation piece at the party, because these are the kind of people I attract in my life. When I share this with them, they show me empathy immediately. They're interested in my story, not because it's sensational, but because it's beyond interesting, it's beyond educating, it's beyond learning something new. And that beyond is the empathy, the respect, the sensitivity, the love that they show for me. And I think these are the things that any trans person would love is the empathy, love, support, respect. And we know that, we feel that we're highly sensitive human beings. Most people are, and most people are sensitive and just add to that sensitivity is what we deal with every day. So empathy, love, respect is important.
I have a fun question. What is your favorite film that portrays the trans journey?
Without a doubt, for me, it had to be The Crying Game. Jay Davidson portrays Dill, who is a trans
Hmm.
woman, preoperative trans woman. It is the storyline is her partner, who is played by Forrest Whitaker, is killed by the IRA, the Irish Republicans, because they were trading secrets and all of that. So one of the guys have to go back to London and find her and get information on her partner. And she falls in love with this guy, and he falls in love with her, and he's a
Oh,
heterosexual male. And she's a hairdresser. Oh my gosh! And she works as a nightclub singer sometimes. And they meet at this bar in London, and this whole storyline starts. And he had no idea. And one night they're about to get intimate, and he finds out that she's actually assigned male at birth, but she is a trans person. It was the highlight in my life. It was a movie in the early 90s. It's a must see. And for me, that was a very, very profound movie in my life that also helped me on my journey, The Crying Game. And Boy George sings the lead song,
I
the
will.
title song, rather. It's beautiful.
I will check it out. One last question. We are
Sure.
running out of time. This has been an amazing time, and I love you for it. What message do you want to send out there to people that don't understand or accept trans people?
I would like to say just be patient and sensitive. Ask your questions that you want to ask, but do it with sensitivity. I know there's not a lot of knowledge, but there has been lots of media coverage in movies, series. There has been enough information now, and I think stop seeing us as entertainment, just entertainment. See us as real people. People that could be your brothers, your sisters, your neighbors, your friends, your aunties, your uncles, your work colleagues. Just see us as part of society and accept that, embrace it, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Thank you so much for those words, Priyanka. You are a beautiful soul. I will forever be grateful for this opportunity we had, and I'm pretty sure we will
I
have
look
much
forward to
more
it
in
and
the
I thank
future.
you for it. And so are you, Louis, a great, great soul. From the moment we met, like you said, it was just this organic sharing of human relations. And I thank you for that. Thank you for having me and thinking of me and choosing this topic.
Of course,
Okay.
of
And
course.
I will quote
Thank you.
Laverne Cox, and she says, stay in the love. So I'm going to have to quote her right now and say, stay in the love. A quote from Laverne Cox, a very, very trailblazing trans woman.